Hey.
So,
That's not going to be good.
have you ever listened to a podcast?
Welcome to this episode of The Marriage Creative. We are a happy family with one really big story, and we want to help you grow, strengthen, and rekindle your marriage.
Welcome into episode number 1 of The Marriage Creative. I'm Cale.
And I'm Carla.
And we're the Nelson family, at least 2/7 of the Nelson family. I was thinking about that the other day. 2/7 is way less than 1/4. How do we get outnumbered so quickly?
I don't know. It just happens.
Yeah, so it just happens as 25 plus years together, going into our 23rd year of marriage. Matter of fact, as we record this in just a few days.
Yeah, 2 days from.
Yeah, it's 23 years of marriage. It's been quite a long time. But at the same time, it's been a really short ride.
Yeah.
So we want to apologize in advance for this podcast and its timing. It's only about 4.5 years late that we're actually creating it.
Mm-hmm.
We were, well, if you go back in my podcasting history, you'll find that I've been trying to get Carla behind the microphone for about, since 2015, 2016. And I'm still working towards that. So
it's a work in progress.
It is a work in progress. And we've been through some things over the last few years that allowed us to get to the point where we finally sit still long enough to get this show produced and put out for you guys. Now, the Marriage Creative is not it's not just about marriage.
Right.
It just happens to be the name of our show and what we've been doing the longest of anything outside of maybe you styling hair.
Yeah, it's what we've stuck to the longest, so we should talk about it, I guess.
So much for being a quitter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we...
Speaking of...
Okay.
That's a good point. One of the things I think is important that we talk about from the get-go is in our getting started. I remember on our 1-year anniversary, and I thought about that early this morning. I thought that's one of the things I would like to start out with is just because you and I always think about the power of our words, and we try to teach that to our children, you know. And I just had this conversation actually the other day with someone and was reminded about it, and then I thought about it again this morning. But, you know, one of the things on our 1-year anniversary, we had a huge fight, and we spent the day away from each other, which is kind of funny, but looking...
It wasn't funny that you ate all the cake by yourself.
It wasn't funny at the time, but it's funny looking back because how silly. I don't even know what we were fighting over, but probably money, I would imagine. Just, you know, I'm a spender, you're not. That probably was... It probably came from that. But anyway, I don't know. But I was thinking back to that day, and you know, I came home after leaving for the whole day and sulking or pouting or whatever I was doing.
Probably pouting.
And you made it a point to tell me that there was a word that could not be spoken in our house from that point on. And just how important that was in establishing our marriage, and the fact that we would not have a marriage to talk about today, 23 years later, if it hadn't have been for your stand that day. You know, I threw around the word loosely, divorce, the D word, and just kind of had gone into marriage thinking that if this didn't work out, or if, you know, we changed our mind, or if we decided that this was too hard and we didn't want to stick it out, there was always an alternative, always an option. And you said to me right then that word would never be spoken again in our home. And it was not an option, whether we liked each other, whether we loved each other or not. Regardless, that was not on the table. That was not an option, and it would not be a word that was spoken. And it just I was reminded about that this morning, just thinking about how committed you were to the covenant of marriage, even when I was not. I mean, not that I wasn't committed to you, but I just always had in my back pocket this other option.
Get out of jail free card.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have been free, but
Yeah, she's always made more than me.
so, but there was an option, an alternative.
Well, I was dedicated to the marriage, and I've had to like tell the rest of the story many times over the years, because that makes me really sound like fantastic, because I'm so dedicated that I've taken your keys away. I've locked the deadbolts from the inside. I won't let you leave and run back to mom and dad's house. And I do tell you that that word's not to be spoken. And it makes for a great story. But the other side of the truth was that as far back as I knew, and as far back as I know that's been studied, that hadn't happened on my side of the family. And I was not going to be the first one to do it. So there was pride, there was ignorance in my decision that probably changed the trajectory of our marriage and our life together. But even through that ignorance, God used that to sustain us.
Because your words
They do matter.
have so much power.
Yeah.
And, regardless of the heart behind saying it, your words still enforced something that honestly had not even been a consideration for me, to think that would not be an option. That if things got hard or bad, or, we fell out of love, or we decided we didn't like each other after all, that wouldn't be an option that was still available.
And so we had dated for almost 3.5 or 4 years.
3.5, yeah.
And we had talked about being married, but we had never talked about getting a divorce.
Until we were married.
And for me, it was like, are you kidding? What are you talking about? I mean, how do you even say that? I remember finding out what divorce was when I was about 6 years old. We had some neighbors move in across the street, and my parents were talking about, well, he used to be married to this lady, and she used to be married to this guy. And in all sincerity, I asked my parents, well, do they all four live together? Because I didn't understand it. I just had never seen it. I didn't know what it was. Carla, your experience coming up was vastly different from that.
Mm-hmm.
And not that it matters, but the large majority of everyone in your family that you saw was involved in some level of divorce.
Yeah, it had been, excuse me, a part of their past at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And, where you talk about being a kid and finding out what divorce was, I can remember being 5 years old and my mom being upset and crying one day. And I, as I'm trying to figure out what's going on, why she's upset, I don't know if it was my parents or my siblings who told me that she was so upset because her parents were getting a divorce.
Your grandparents when you were 5.
My grandparents, yeah. And so it wasn't just something that, I heard about from friends or neighbors. Mm-hmm. It was my own grandparents who I thought, were like, I thought they would be together forever.
Right.
So even at 5 years old, finding out, oh, wait a minute, they're not going to be together. So now I'm going to visit them separately. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. So my idea of divorce came so early that was natural and normal, and not that it didn't hurt people, but
it was nearly anticipated.
Yes. If your grandparents divorce,
anybody can divorce.
Right.
Okay. And just to get it all out there, our show is not just about divorce, but this was one of those moments in our marriage. I remember it very vividly.
Oh, I do too.
When we had remodeled a little, we had a 960 square foot home that we had remodeled from the studs out and from the floor joist up. And I was a professional firefighter at the time, which meant I was gone every third day for 24 hours at a time. So to add some security for Carla, we put double key or double bolt deadlocks, whatever you call that, where you have a key on the inside and the outside, just to add, some confidence for her while she was at home for those 24 hours by herself, at least that one night. And that afternoon you came in and you were angry about whatever, and you just got to the point where you said, I'm going to my mom and daddy's house. Or she might have just said, I'm going to my daddy's. I'm not sure which one it was, but it meant the same thing. And we had this little Volkswagen, and I remember getting her keys and locking both of the deadbolts, because I kept my keys in my pocket, and I got her keys and put them in my other pocket. And I told her that you're not going anywhere, and we're going to figure this out. And basically, she was stuck like Chuck.
Yeah, and then I was even more mad because I'm thinking,
You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah, I am not stuck. You cannot tell me I'm stuck.
I married a very independent lady.
And, like there's always an option. But literally taking the options away made me stop and realize, okay, so why am I always looking at the option? Why am I not just looking at the commitment or the covenant or, you felt conviction even, I think, over the fact that you had taken those vows.
Oh, yeah.
And
it was a pretty serious deal.
I remember you saying to me, I committed my life to you in front of all those people and God.
Yeah.
And I take that serious. And I can remember hearing you say that and thinking, well, why do I not take that serious? I mean, that's a serious thing. But I honestly, I meant it when I said it as much as I could.
Right, because you were there in the moment.
But
it was your
here, in the midst of not getting along, all of a sudden I thought, well, do I mean it? Did I mean it? What does it even mean? Mm-hmm. And for the first time thinking through the vows that we took and thinking, I didn't even know what I was saying. I was saying it because it was the thing to say.
At the moment in the time.
But did I even know what it meant?
Yeah.
And boy, 23 years later, we know what it means now.
We kind of got it figured. Well, I don't say we haven't figured out.
No, but I mean,
we've seen some examples of it all.
Yeah, talk about for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health.
Yeah,
we've seen all of those things for sure.
Yeah,
and but I didn't know at the time that I was saying that. Granted, I was only 21, but still,
that was like the Little House on the Prairie girls had been married for 7 or 8 years by then.
Yeah. I just think about, how many people walk into marriage and say those words, but don't really even know what they mean.
And here, 20 years later, they still may be wondering.
Yeah.
Possibly. 5 years later, 6 months in. I mean, we were a year in. You came to your parents' house before that. You and your mom sat down and ate the top of our cake. And then you were ready to come back down here that same day because you were so discouraged, disgusted, or whatever you want to say. Mad, pouting, I don't know. It's probably a little bit of all of it. But I don't even know what we were arguing about, and that doesn't matter. It's just a memory that here 2 days prior to our anniversary, as we're recording this, we're here at your parents' home in your old bedroom recording this, and it's been 23 years and 5 kids later that we stand here more together today than we were then. And I think that's kind of where we want to go with this program, and that's what we want to kind of grow, and the conversations we intend to have through our time together with our listeners, ourselves, and maybe other guests, is to I'm hungry, is to talk about how we had the opportunity to walk off and quit, but we didn't. God sustained us, and over the next 22 years, He's really shown us a lot of Himself in each other. And I think that there's a need for that, because in that first year, we needed to hear something like that.
Oh, yeah.
In that 5th year, we needed to hear something like that. After you got 2 or 3 kids at home, you need to hear it again. Mm-hmm. And I guess it comes back to 2018, April of 2018, when we were at church, and the pastor speaking nothing about marriage, and you and I both heard in our spirits, if you will, that we were being called to speak to families, couples especially, on the power of their words, their agreement together, and how that would affect the trajectory of their marriage and their legacy. That would affect everything.
Right. I think too, being that we've totally walked out opposite roles from most people, that just gives us a little bit different perspective, being that I've typically been the breadwinner.
No, you've been the breadwinner.
Well, yeah. And that you've been the stay-at-home dad, for 18 plus years now.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we felt that calling to speak to couples, to families, that God was highlighting to us that we've kind of lived a unique situation.
Not that others haven't.
Yeah.
But for us, it's been pretty different.
Most families typically either both people work, or either in a lot of cases, the man, if only one person was going to work, it would typically be the man. I think is how we were raised.
Yeah, that's changed a little bit in the last 20 years.
But growing up, that's what we saw.
Our dads both went to work, killed something, brought it home, and Mama's fried it up in a pan, kind of a thing.
Well, my daddy didn't kill anything, but
you know what I'm saying. That's the old caveman joke.
He definitely worked. So I think that, that gives us a little bit different perspective sometimes, being that you've sort of known what it's like to be the one at home raising children, and I've known what it's like to be the person getting up and leaving the house and going to work every day. And recently I was talking to a client who is expecting her first child, and she was just talking about her and her husband are trying to work out the dynamics of who will work and who will stay home, or if they will both work, or what that looks like. And I just shared with her from my heart that there are a couple of things that I would warn her about. One being that if she chooses to be the one that's leaving the home every day to go to work, to be aware that there are going to be some times that she comes home and she's jealous of things that her husband would have experienced, for the first time with their child. I can remember coming home and you saying, Eli's favorite food is cream corn now, and I was like, what? How do you get to determine what his favorite food is? I'm his mama. Or coming home and, getting ready to take him outside, and the shoes that I'm putting on him are not shoes that I picked out. His winter coat is not a winter coat that I picked out. And those are things that a mom thinks that she will be the one doing, typically, or I did. And, those are like staple items that your child wears for a full season. And me looking at them and thinking, well, I don't know if this is what I would have picked out, because I didn't get the option. And in your mind, you're just thinking, well, he needed a coat and shoes. He's outgrowing, what he has. So it made sense for you, very practical. But to me, it was like a wound.
Right.
Like, how could you take that from me? That's my job. And so I was just warning her, if you step into that role, be aware that there are going to be times that what your husband is just doing as like the next step of getting through the day, survival, may seem like
he's robbing you,
a deep offense to you. And
which that probably didn't help us in those early days either.
Exactly. And I said, we picked out a walker together, but then one day I came home from work and my child was in the walker, scooting all around the kitchen, having the best time. And I'm like, well, how did this happen? And, things like that were very hard for me to swallow. Whereas to you, it was survival. It was like, well, I need to cook. So to entertain him, let me put this walker together and put him in it. And, it seemed very natural to you, and it would. But I can remember coming home and not thinking of it being natural at all. It was like you had done that to hurt me. And that was not your intention. So I was just trying to share with her, be prepared.
Right, because it's different.
Things that you don't know right now that would bother you.
They're going to bother you.
They're going to bother you.
Yeah.
And so, just thinking about our role over the years has looked very different from the traditional how we grew up.
Yeah, and like I would sit home with the kids, and be worried about how we're going to pay the bills, because I'm not adding anything financially to the kitty, because I'm just sitting at home eating crackers with the kids every day.
Goldfish, not crackers.
Yeah, crackers and stars.
Puffs.
Yeah, puffs, star puffs. Those things are amazing. They got me through so many church services back in the day.
Goldfish and puffs.
Yeah, but so we have lived a very different dynamic than most, and not that we're the only couple to ever do that. I mean, many people do it, especially nowadays. Even post-COVID, it's more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
More that way. And one of the things I dealt with was the self-condemnation of not having a job and not going and doing something to contribute financially to the household. Mm-hmm. I lived with that, not only self-condemnation, but from every angle. I mean, from family to friends to everybody. Mm-hmm. Everybody had an opinion about a man not working in the late 1990s, early 2000s.
As if staying at home is not working.
Yeah. And I always say, guys, if you have a stay-at-home wife, when you get home today, you just need to walk in and kiss her in the mouth, because you have no idea what she's done. And that goes for you too, ladies, if you've got a stay-at-home husband.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is work for sure.
Yeah. And
work without a paycheck, but
there's no checks involved. You just help write checks. That's all you do when you go buy walkers and the wrong winter coat for your infants. So anyway, those are just some of the things that we've been through, we've dealt with over the last. That was just, first 5 years into the marriage. I remember one day Carla telling me, I don't even like you. How did I marry? This is 5 years. We got 6 years in the marriage, 1 or 2, 3 kids. I don't even like you. Like, we've been married all this time. We've got kids. We're running this business. Got a really nice house. What do you mean you don't like me? How do you not like me? I like you. I didn't know there was a problem. We're going to talk about that too, guys. So don't think you're going to get off the hook with just Carla over here complaining. It's going to be, we're going to cover all those topics and more. And so one more thing before we just get out of here and let folks go for this episode. I think we just need to continue to help them understand who we are. I mean, I think that we've made the case that we are believers. We put Jesus as the number one in our marriage and our lives personally.
Absolutely.
We're parents. We do have 5 children. Our eldest is almost 19 years old. Our youngest is just now 10. So we've kind of got them spread out a little bit. We've been business owners for over 25 years. Carla's been self-employed since she was self-employed. She worked a couple of jobs and found out real quick that wasn't what she wanted to do. I was always a company man. I grew up that way, seeing a lot of that in my households, my grandparents and whatnot. But
I know when you said households, I was like, well, how many households have you
I'm
been
talking
from?
like my mom and dad, my grandparents, stuff like that. They were, the mill. They grew up in the mill, working in the mills and whatnot. So here in the Deep South, that's what people did back in the day.
Although you did have a grandfather who was an entrepreneur.
I
also,
did. He was a very successful man and quite an inspiration to me as well. So it made that start easier, probably having some sort of influence like that. So we've been married for 23 years.
On the flip side, I had always come from
entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
That's
my dad had always been self-employed, and so again, another big difference in our upbringing was that. To you, it made sense to go to work somewhere and work there until you retired.
Get 2 weeks vacation, retirement.
And for me, that was never an option.
Benefits. Had to get them benefits. That's cost you millions of dollars a year. Anyway, that's just a little taste. And now since that time, we've grown greatly in our relationship together and our relationship with the Lord. Our children
still have a long way to go.
Yeah, we've got a long way to go. Our kids are fantastic. We love them. We think they're the best that there is. And going back to 2018 when we were at church there together, like I was speaking a few minutes ago, and we both heard to minister to these married couples and families. I was in the middle of podcasting, very successful stuff, and God called me out of that. I had a really successful commercial, I guess you would call it, hobby podcast. It was a commercial show. Commercial meant I got paid to do it. God called us out of that, began working
not us,
me out of that. We're one.
I know, but it wasn't anything that
I just misspoke. Excuse me.
Had anything together doing.
But anyway, God released me from that. He called me directly out of it, and I had no idea why.
Which was also hard for you to let go of.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride there. I'll be the first to admit that.
Well,
success tastes good.
Success, yeah.
And so God spoke to us and said, I need you guys to start ministering to couples. And we were excited about it because we really thought we had...
Well, we thought kind of the next day we would just start doing that.
Yeah.
And then...
and then exactly 1 year later,
yeah,
exactly 365 days passed, and we find ourselves at Spartanburg Regional Medical Center in the ER. Mm-hmm. Carla has been deathly ill for no less than a month. Had been sick for 3 or 4 years, 2 years
well,
probably.
Had been dealing with illness to some degree for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But much intensified by then.
By then it was, she literally whispered to me and said, I feel like I'm hanging on by a thread. Mm-hmm. So if you've ever been there before, or you know someone that has, my medical training, emergency medical training background, I knew what I was looking at. It didn't look good. And I had a question. I questioned God. Not that I didn't respect him, but I was just questioning. I said, a year ago, you called us to this thing to share with people about marriages, and they're saying she's going to die. So how am I, as a widower and dad of 5 kids with no income, going to witness or
walk this out
with anybody? How am I going to be a help to anybody that's married when I'm not married? This was a great run, but this is not what you said. How is that supposed to look? So, as you can tell, she's breathing. So the devil surely didn't win that one, because he's defeated at every level.
And it's that Romans 8:28, what the enemy meant for harm, God used for our good, because we had not truly walked through illness. That part of our vows had not really been...
No, all we had known was the richer and poorer kind of...
Well, and...
better and worse.
Yeah, but we knew stomach bug or...
sick kid.
Strep throat, whatever.
Yeah.
But we had never walked through an extended illness, and especially never faced anything life-threatening.
Yeah.
So I think... what the enemy meant for harm, God used for good, and that not that God gave me cancer, but that he allowed us to learn what our vows really meant in
during
that area, that better prepared us to do what we're doing today.
Yeah. So Carla's clean, whole, and healthy.
Yes.
Our kids are great, and we're excited about beginning this adventure with you here on the Marriage Creative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry it's taken us 4 years to line our ducks up. COVID didn't help either. Don't believe the hype. We weren't sitting around the house eating popcorn. We worked harder during COVID than we worked the year prior. So I don't know what you guys did to just sitting around and Instagramming all day, but that wasn't us. We were working. But we're happy to be here with you, and we are really excited to share what God's given us, what little insight he's given us on these things to encourage you and to help you move forward together as a family.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Today's episode is brought to you by Post and Gate. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Marriage Creative. Subscribe and click the notification icon so you can stay up to date with all things The Marriage Creative. To learn more about who we are and what we do, check us out on social media or go to themarriagecreative.com today.
This isn't hard.
Okay.
It's episode number 1 of the Modern Christian Men podcast. That's the wrong show.
Oh my.